They called it nothing. The place between galaxies, between the rivers of starlight and the currents of gravity, was a silence so vast that even the ancients feared to mark it. They labeled it on their charts only with blank space, drawing their trade lanes and colonies around it as if some cosmic wound had cut into the galaxy itself. The void was not merely empty, it was unknowable, and yet it was there that humanity found its calling. No one asked them to. No council decree gave them permission. The great powers of the galaxy assumed humanity would stay within its fragile little system, shackled to the cradle of soul. But humans had always been restless, always carried a hunger for what's next. They looked at that blank space and did not see fear. They saw opportunity. They saw a challenge. The void called them, and they answered. Before we dive into this story, if you enjoy these journeys, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next one. Now, let's begin. At first, it was just small ships, jury-rigged freighters and survey vessels patched together with ingenuity and recklessness. They pushed their engines farther than was wise, straining past the edge of mapped stars. Some never came back. The silence swallowed them whole, and their names were only whispered among spacers in backwater taverns. But others returned. They brought back readings, coordinates, fragments of impossible data. The first map was drawn on a scratched piece of polymer glass, a crude outline of empty zones and strange gravitational distortions. It was worthless to the empires, but to humanity, it was everything. It was proof that they could go where no one else dared. Soon, humans weren't just drifting into the void, they were charting it. The alien powers laughed at first. What use was a map of nothing? But then came the accidents. Fleets vanishing on long voyages. Convoys swallowed by black regions where physics seemed to fold in on itself. The laughter faded when humans, with their crude charts, showed paths through those silent places. Routes where gravity tides wouldn't tear you apart, where hidden drift currents could carry a ship safely for months. Suddenly, humanity had something the ancients did not, a language for the silence. They became the mapmakers of the void, and with that, the galaxy began to notice. The more they mapped, the stranger the discoveries became. Dead suns hung suspended in empty blackness, long cooled yet humming faintly, as if something fed on their remains. Vast structures, bigger than worlds, drifted with no origin, no purpose, the ruins of something older than memory. Gravity storms raged without cause, invisible tempests that twisted even light. But it was not just hazards they uncovered. Hidden inside the silence were pathways, routes faster than any slipstream, older than any warp gate. Some believed they were scars left by civilizations long dead. Others said they were accidents of physics. Humans didn't care. They mapped them, traveled them, and came back alive when no one else could. Their charts became coveted. Suddenly, the empires who had dismissed them came begging for maps. Trade guilds paid fortunes for safe routes. Militaries demanded charts for hidden corridors that could outflank rivals. But humans were never foolish enough to give everything away. They sold fragments, partial paths, but the full maps they kept, because only they understood them. The maps weren't tidy star grids. They weren't logical spirals. They were living documents, half intuition, half science. Some routes were marked with warnings like, "Sounds wrong here," or "The ship shuddered for no reason." Notes about feelings, dread, pressure, whispers in the dark. Aliens scoffed at such nonsense, but when they ignored it, their ships vanished. When they listened, they lived. The galaxy began to whisper a new truth. If you wanted to survive the void, you needed a human guide. And that gave humanity something more valuable than fleets or armies. It gave them relevance. No one admitted it openly, of course. The old empires still treated them as upstarts. But behind closed doors, contracts were signed, treaties were written, and more alien vessels carried at least one human navigator. The fragile species of Sul had made themselves indispensable. But the maps told darker stories too. The further they charted, the more they found patterns. Whole swaths of the void seemed avoided, even by chance. As if something actively erased itself from detection, blackened corridors stretched across impossible distances, not random but deliberate, as though someone, or something, had carved highways through nothingness. And then came the whispers, not just metaphorical ones written in survey notes, but real transmissions. Broken fragments caught on deep-range sensors, voices speaking in no known tongue, distorted and layered as if echoing across dimensions. They were faint, always at the edges of mapped zones. Every human who heard them reported the same feeling, a sense of being watched. The ancients warned them to stop, to seal the maps, to leave the void uncharted. They said some doors should never be opened, but humanity never listened. They had charted oceans, crossed deserts, climbed mountains no one thought survivable. To them, the void was just another frontier. Dangerous, yes. Terrifying, absolutely. But that only made it more important to map. And so, they pushed further. The first great expedition into the deep void was called the Solara Venture. It carried a crew of mixed species, but its navigators were all human. For 3 years, the ship sailed corridors of silence, mapping dead zones and forgotten scars. They returned with charts that redefined galactic trade. They also returned with something else, an artifact. It was small, simple, no bigger than a fist. A cube that pulsed faintly with inner light. No scanner could read it. No field could contain it. But when placed near a map, it changed the routes. Paths shifted, hazards faded, new lines appeared. It was not just a key. It was as if the artifact wanted them to map further. Some said it was bait, others said it was a gift, but humanity did what they always did. They used it, and the maps grew. Soon, routes through the void became highways of commerce. What had once taken years now took months. Empires who had once ruled by choke points lost power as humans charted back doors through the silence. The galactic balance began to tilt, not by war, but by maps. The mapmakers of the void were no longer a curiosity. They were a force. But forces attract enemies. The first attacks were subtle. Convoys destroyed, survey teams disappearing, stolen charts reappearing with deliberate errors meant to kill. Then came the accusations. The empires claimed humans hoarded paths to gain leverage. Rivals spread rumors that humanity had awoken something in the void and now led others to their deaths. And beneath all the politics, the whispers grew louder. Entire crews reported hearing them now, not just humans. Voices in the silence, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, sometimes chanting. Instruments picked up faint harmonics matching no natural phenomenon. Ships traveling the deep void came back, changed. Crews spoke of dreams that weren't theirs, of seeing starless skies that matched no known coordinates. Still, the maps grew, because humanity could not stop. They were addicted. Not to power, not to profit, though both came in abundance, but to discovery. Every new path was another proof that the galaxy had underestimated them. Every hidden corridor was a reminder that fragility was not weakness. Humans had always survived by navigating the unknown, by making sense of chaos. And in the end, that became their greatest weapon. When the first true war of the void came, it was not fought with fleets. It was fought with maps. A rival empire, desperate to control the silence, launched an invasion. They tried to blockade routes, to lock humanity out of their own creation. But the void is not kind to arrogance. Their fleets moved blindly, following stolen charts. The humans, guiding ragtag ships with instinct and memory, bypassed every blockade. They appeared where no one expected, struck supply lines, vanished into routes no alien ship could follow. The war lasted less than a year. When it ended, humanity stood taller than ever before. not because of conquest, but because every empire now understood a single truth. The void belonged to the Mapmakers. The whispers never stopped. Some say they are growing stronger. Some claim that what sleeps in the silence is beginning to stir. But humanity, reckless and relentless, continues to draw their lines across the impossible. They were never the strongest, never the fastest, never the oldest. But when the galaxy looked into the dark and saw only fear, humanity looked into the dark and made a map. And that was enough to change everything.